I want to turn to Mark Zaid, an attorney who's pretty much an expert when it comes to cases involving national security and security clearances. Mark, thank you for joining us. My first question is the folders.
Thanks,
Alex. My first question is the folders and what we should sort of understand or presume about these missing documents or empty folders. Perhaps the documents aren't missing. I mean, when you heard that there were 48 empty folders with classified designations, do you assume that the Justice Department already has those in its possession? Or, I mean, what is your thesis on those?
Yeah, substantively, honestly, I wasn't that concerned because I have a vision in my mind as to how everything left the White House. And it is literally that someone took their arm and swept the entire desk off into boxes, no matter what was there. So I always say, if someone did that to my desk, there's an empty can of Red Bull and a stapler and maybe some attorney-client privilege documents and the like. I have some of these same file folder cover photos of classified records with no classified info in them, of course. The government gave them to me. Now, I don't keep 48 of them because I don't need 48 of them, but I kept one as a souvenir. So I think these could just be souvenirs that they kept or they just swept them up. What's more important to me with respect to these folders, these marked classification folders, is that whoever would have looked in the box would have been under the impression of, maybe there's something in these boxes that we should be looking for to make sure there is no classified information in the cartons. That's what I'd like to know more about.
You know, your compatriot Bradley Moss tweeted today effectively that if there was an empty folder that was originally used to properly store classified records, there will be documentation indicating who put the records in that folder, why they were placed there, and what the records were. So I'm reading that thinking we're going to actually know if the folders are not, or if the data, the documents that were in the folders are not actually in the Justice Department's possession. Is that fair?
I don't know if there's honestly any markings on them. I mean, just think about it. You know, back in your office, you probably have empty blank manila folders. You know, in my office, sometimes I have manila folders that were from prior clients that I've emptied the contents, destroyed them, and I've reused the manila folder. But there's no other markings on them. And at least when I've dealt with these cover sheets, there's generally nothing on the cover sheet other than a standard format to indicate that the contents are classified if there are, in fact, contents in them. So we may or may not know. Now, what we do know is that those that were in the White House with him, people like John Bolton, have indicated that they tried not to give classified records to the president because they were concerned of what might happen to them, but that sometimes they acknowledged they failed and they forgot to get the records back, and ostensibly either that's what a lot of these records are, or someone specifically actually grabbed some of them, perhaps under orders of the president. That's something we're going to need to find out.
I want to know more about the Office of the Director of National Intelligence's review in all of this, right? Because that's happening concurrent to all of this. When we're talking about human intelligence sources that may have been compromised by the storage of this material down at Trump's Beach Club, is this kind of, I mean, what is the response at DNI? Does this have real world, real time implication in terms of ongoing CIA operations? I mean, what's happening here as if they discover that people or sources may have been compromised?
Well, all of that could be true. And the reality is we may, and maybe even likely, never know about that, because the more sensitive of the classified information will likely never come to light because it's so sensitive they won't prosecute anyone pertaining to those particular files. Because generally speaking, that means that information is going to have to be revealed in some shape or form in an unclassified summary under the Classified Information Procedures Act, or maybe even declassified. And in fact, the jury would have access to the information even without a clearance, even though they'd be instructed they're not allowed to repeat it to anyone. But still, it might not be worth the risk of allowing anyone to know. There are so many classified marked records that have been recovered that the lower level classification documents could be the ones that serve as the source for prosecution.
That's so interesting. I mean, it is worth mentioning, though. I mean, this has happened before, right? In I think, 2017, the U.S. had to extract a top spy from inside Russia because of a meeting Trump had in the Oval Office. Isn't that right? I believe. Yes, the decision to carry out the extraction of the Russian inside the Kremlin occurred soon after a May 2017 meeting in the Oval Office in which Trump discussed highly classified intelligence with the Russian foreign minister and the then Russian ambassador to the U.S. So, I mean, it has happened before that Trump's, whims have really compromised high-level intelligence operations. We found out about it there. You're saying we may not find out about it at present, and that, in fact, the lower, less classified information may be what's used in the lawsuit that's building up.
Yeah, entirely. And Chuck Rosenberg spoke in the last hour on the program, former U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, where a lot of these cases end up being prosecuted because it's the CIA's backyard. And he was absolutely right that oftentimes you see a classified record and you sort of scratch your head trying to figure out, well, why is that significant? It says that Putin has Apple Jacks for breakfast every morning. Why would that be classified? Well, that's not the classified information. It's the source that provided that information to one of our agencies and that placement of that source. And if anyone who knows the information, if the Russians got a hold of that, they could know, well, there's only 2 people who know that Putin gets Apple Jacks for breakfast every morning, and that source would be burned. Now, hopefully, we'll never find out something like that because, again, it's too sensitive. But the DNI and other agencies will assess whether or not the damage, if any, has been caused by who's been present at Mar-a-Lago, who had access to the boxes based on the surveillance film that the FBI seized by a search warrant in late June. And, I mean, a lot of that will be very telling, and we'll know as time goes by either what we actually will never know or, obviously, substantively, what will be revealed publicly.